We've done lightning, we've done frost. Now is the time of fire. Oh yes, hello my fellow sorcerers and welcome. Today I've got something very special for you that I am very proud of. I've had a lot of requests to make fire and specifically Meteor work, and I would like to think then that I have done just that. I mean, you can see in the clear going on, it's a tier 50, it's over 20 levels higher than me, that's fairly decent, and I am going at one hell of a pace, 1-2-shotting everything on the way past with consistent, endless meteor drops. It really does feel so much fun, you feel so powerful, and it's an entirely different pace and vibe to either Arc Lashy focused or Ice Shardy Blizzardy focused setups. I am really enjoying it, and it has a lot of kick to it. You will see some colossally massive damage numbers playing this way. When you immobilize, vulnerable, and drop a meteor on an enemy, you disintegrate them, and it is beyond satisfying. Now, there is also the extra hook that Meteor itself has a really high base lucky hit chance. We stack lucky hit, take the Meteor enchantment, and then Meteor will drop, and then trigger another Meteor to drop, which will trigger another Meteor to drop, and you can end up in these chains, just causing an apocalypse through nightmare dungeons as you turn to ash all in your path, and it feels phenomenal. The fact that we have double teleport too, that's consistently coming off cooldown, and we just fly around group Meteor, group Meteor, group Meteor, obliterating packs of enemies, elites, and ultimately bosses, and I really cannot recommend this playstyle enough, especially if you're hankering for something just a little bit different. This really is the nuke Meteor build, not about the burning damage, about the raw impact of this skill, and it has some serious raw impact. And it doesn't hurt that it is incredibly tanky too, as we can play with some different burning synergies to normal to very much stay alive. So as per usual, let's get into this, how it works, how to play it, and all of that good stuff, starting with the skill tree. Now, take, well, whatever you want here, because for once, because we're using fire as our main source of damage anyway that comes with burning, we don't need to take Firebolt for the enchantment, so we can use actually 2 enchantment slots. So yeah, put any 2 points here just to make it over here, then we are just needing 4 more points to move on. We may as well get Devastation, as it at least is tangibly useful, and then 1 rank of Potent Warding, as again, it's technically tiny little bit useful, but, you know, resistances are broken anyway. But hey, moving on to Flame Shield, as per usual, getting the Enhanced and the Shimmering for that emergency button. No, we don't need Mystical Flame. The mana here is very much, as you saw and will see, not a problem. We want our Teleport along with Enhanced as minimum cooldown as possible, and the Survival from Shimmering. Teleport will also make our second enchantment slot, so we can spam teleport around the place, which leads to all sorts of goodness that we will get to. Then we want Maximum Glass Cannon for the free damage. We're not struggling for survivability, but there is another option here that I'll get to once I've gone through the whole thing. We grab our Ice Armor, and we do take Enhanced for a bit of mana regen, but that's not forever, which again I will get to once we hit the Paragon boards. Then, of course, Frost Nova, as our source of vulnerability. This is key and required, and flows into the general gameplay loop of how to Meteor. We want our lucky hit crit resetting defensives, as per is the norm, and then down here with even more lucky hit. This is very much a big lucky hit and crit build, so the more we can get, the better. One in Align the Elements, just to grab both Mana Shield, as this will be essentially permanently up, and it's good mitigation, and Protection, both again for mitigation, but for barrier synergy too. And then we get to the star of the show itself in Meteor. We want to enhance it, of course, and then we take the Immobilize to trigger the super version of Devouring Blaze for 100% increased crit. At least if you got 4 ranks like I do, but still, it is a huge damage bump after the first Meteor is dropped for the second Meteor, and it will help a lot with enemies that are under half health for reasons, again, we'll get to. This time we do fill out Inner Flames, as it's just free damage for Meteor, and there's nowhere really better to spend the points. Then we grab our ultimate, Inferno, which is a wonderful ultimate, and it looks badass, and it's really cool to actually get to use it. The Vortex Suck to stack everyone for more meteoring, and then infinite mana while it's up is only a good thing. This lets you absolutely melt through chunky elites and bosses. Then we get simply 3 ranks of Fiery Surge just to keep the mana flowing and take the edge off, but again, this is something we'll take points out of when we get a certain level of Paragon board progression that again we will get to. Then our pièce de résistance, cherry on top, Esu's Ferocity. This is a big deal when we're playing Meteor in this way, focusing on the sheer impact damage of it. The increased crit damage above 50% life, along with an aspect we'll get to, means that for most enemies, 1 Meteor will be enough. You'll teleport on them, you'll freeze them, you'll drop the Meteor, and they will be beyond one shot, and it really does feel very good. Our enchantment slots are next then, and we use Meteor. Yes, the Meteor build uses Meteor. Why does it do this? Well, Meteor itself has a really high lucky hit chance, and this is before barrier lucky hit chance comes into play. That takes it to like nearly 80%. Which means that every single time you drop a Meteor, there is about a 7% chance of another Meteor dropping, and then a 7% chance of another Meteor dropping. And this just results in some nutty drop chains that absolutely melt through higher health targets, and it just looks awesome to see it chain rain down, covering the screen in meteors. Then we grab Teleport for our dodge becoming a teleport, and this needs probably a little bit of a note on because it really does help fuel the playstyle of this build. Because, of course, we are, dropping meteors on enemies, we want them to be in this circle on the ground to get hit by it. Yeah, duh. And an incredible way to do that, and what makes this pop, is obviously Raiment of the Infinite for that teleport group up stun. We want that as often as possible. Once every 6 seconds just doesn't cut it. So we take this enchantment slot so we can use our dodge as the same, so that we can chain teleport group meteor through every dungeon. We arrive, and then drop the Meteor. Then we leave, drop the Meteor. Then we leave, drop the Meteor. And you just see how it fuels along. On top of that, the teleport version of Evade triggers barrier synergy. It gives us that protection buff. It will also give us mana, thanks to prodigies. And it will have a colossal lucky hit chance. 98% or 119% with barriers up. This means that every time you either teleport or dodge teleport, there is a good sort of 12% chance to just summon a meteor on the now pre-stacked and stunned group of enemies. That really amps up the speed and power of this build, and it makes it just flow so well as, again, you fly through the dungeon, chain dropping meteors on nicely grouped, stunned, and waiting for the sweet relief of death enemies. But yeah, the general flow, how you pilot and operate operate this is jump on the group of enemies, you then want to freeze and vulnerable them, you then want to activate your flame shield because we have binding embers, this now immobilizes them, they are now stunned, immobilized, frozen and vulnerable, and then you drop the meteor on them and watch it just one-shot everything. This is amazing because not only does it make the Devouring Blaze passive go to 100% thanks to the immobilized now on Flame Shield, it also means that we triple dip on control because they're stunned, frozen, and immobilized. So you can see why Teleport, Flame Shield, Frost Nova Drop is so good, and then we can do it twice as often thanks to the Teleport enchantment. Ice Shield is purely defensive, and then Inferno if there's just a big overwhelming group of enemies or a big pack of elites or a boss to just give you that full control, infinite mana, burn them down quite literally. Other than that, everything else is fairly straightforward. And talking of everything else, let's move on to everything else with our aspects, our gear, our stats, what we want to roll. Gem-wise, it is fairly simple. We want to do more crit damage to vulnerable enemies, we want more life in our armor, and more armor in our jewelry. So, aspect-wise, we have this, which is probably one of the more important ones, though definitely not key. The Shattered Stars. This is what makes it so that when we Meteor, there is extra little ones dropping around the place. This is useful because it's a little bit of a damage increase, but it means that you will catch enemies not in the main circle, setting them on fire and immobilizing them, which then lets the follow-up Meteor on them do even more damage thanks to Devouring Blaze, and it just gives you way more coverage, which is something you need to clean up anything that you have missed in the raiment grouping, as well as, you know, improving your overall DPS. Then we have core or mastery skills above 100 mana, gaining 34% crit chance, or up to 40 if I had a better roll. Obviously, Meteor is a mastery, and we want it to crit all the time. The base crit chance I have here is 30%. We have an extra 15% coming in from Paragon board that we'll get to. We have this 34 here, that's 64, 74, 79, and then we have the extra chance from Essu's Ferocity. Basically, we start getting into the realm of Meteor approaching 100% crit chance, which is what you're aiming for with this build. Then we have Prodigy, so our cooldowns restore mana. This lets you keep going and not have to worry about ever running out, on top of a couple other things we will also talk about. We also want more vulnerable damage. While you have a barrier, we will have a barrier all the time, and this is a huge bump to those Frost Nova'd enemies. Then, as I went over, Control, this is a silly damage gain, as we will be constantly applying all three statuses to most things we go up against. Then, on our helmet, we want lucky hit chance with a barrier. This is what lets our teleport just go to silly 119%, and Meteor on 73% for those lovely Meteor chains with the enchantment slot. Raiment of the Infinite as the mandatory unique that pulls this all together for both the teleport enchantment and your regular teleport for the group Meteor Slam. Then on our gloves, we have this, 3 curses. Big crit damage increase on Meteor for healthy targets. Healthy is above 80% health. This is what lets you one-shot most things with that first Meteor, assuming it crits, which it probably will because you're approaching 100% crit chance with Meteor. It really is huge, and I have found it to essentially be irreplaceable. On my legs, I have Damaging Elite gives you a barrier. This is 10 seconds of pure barrier synergy, and it's really good. However, if you are pushing Nightmare Dungeons, I would recommend swapping this to Disobedience for the armor, but against general farming and your own level content, the extra barrier uptime is very nice. And then finally, Binding Embers, so that we can immobilize with our Flame Shield before the first Meteor, that then will continue the immobilize chain as Meteor does immobilize in of itself. Oh, alright then, that all comes together quite well. And to add an addendum on to surviving with this build, if you are feeling yourself a little bit too squishy, what you want to do is take 3 points out of Glass Cannon, you want to take 1 point out of Elemental Attunement, as we're still getting that proc enough even with only 2, and you want to add 1 to Endless Pyre just to get to Warmth for that permanent passive healing for every burning enemy around you. Meteor makes everything burn, and if you're needing a couple meteors to kill, if you're pushing, this does really add a lot, and you can feel the difference, especially against enemies that are applying constant dots or bleeds or poison to you. But it is completely up to you if you think you need that extra help surviving. I personally leave it like that, and I am just a sucker for more damage. So what actual stats are you looking to roll on your gear here? Well, for Meteor, there is one big one, and that is crit chance. Following that, you want lucky hit chance. Following that, you want max mana and or resource generation and or lucky hit chance to restore your mana. A couple of those goes a long way. After that, pure crit damage, then cooldown reduction to spam your defensives as much as possible, and then attack speed, general int, and general damage increases from, you know, against stunned enemies, against controlled enemies, against close enemies, and so on and such forth. You want to be aiming for a minimum base of 30% crit chance, you want your crit damage to at least be over the 100%, and you want your cooldown reduction to at least be 30%, and then your lucky hit chance to at least be 50%. Mine goes up to 80% with a barrier, which is obviously a huge bump too, but 50% is your minimum. And of course, ranks of Meteor, which are specifically on your legs, are very, very good here, as well as ranks of defensive skills, which you can get a good chunk of on your boots. They are always welcome and should certainly be looked out for. So, that just leaves our Paragon board, and I will warn you, you're probably going to need a lot of points. I would recommend at least sort of level 80 or so before trying Meteor. It's kind of just very hungry for it. As per usual, follow my path round, and the first and arguably most important glyph is the Mastery Adept one, so our Meteor is 20% larger. Just makes it super easier to hit with and makes it hit a lot harder. It really is a no-brainer. Moving on up then to the Burning Instinct board, though we don't actually get the legendary node. This is your usual fire synergy, that we do more damage to burning enemies, Meteor sets enemies on fire, and anything that needs more than one Meteor, this will suddenly make it hit very hard. And once an enemy gets below 80% health, your damage does drop off, and this helps it keep up as they will be consistently burning as you drop meteors repeatedly on them. Then for the glyph, we want territorial. As we are teleporting on top of and then meteoring on top of groups of enemies, this will help you both survive them once they get unstunned, if they live that long, and more importantly, do a ton more damage with that close meteor drop. Then we move on over to the vulnerable or frigid fate board, and grab the Glyph Tactician to amp this node in particular for massive amounts of vulnerable damage. Activate the bonus for 10% increased damage every defensive for 4 seconds. This is up perpetually because we're just spamming through defensives, and is all good. Grab the cluster down here for even more vulnerable damage, and we are ready to move on to what really makes this sing, the Searing Heat for 15% extra crit chance on Meteor. Now you might be thinking, why is this fourth then? Well, it's still less effective than the first two boards, sadly, but it is definitely important to get to. Essentially, you need to be able to get this far around your Paragon to properly play Meteor. Grab all of the bonus fire damage, it's just a huge gain for this setup, it really is noticeable. Head down and get even more of it at this little cluster here, and then finally we can get the glyph, which is Flame Feeder, to do more damage to burning targets and to burning enemies. Again, it helps anything that the first meteor doesn't one-shot, which of course will happen when you start pushing, or against particularly damage-resistant or tanky elites, and then even more fire damage too. So once we are done with this board, we move on up here to the next gate, and we care about the Static Surge board for stunning enemies restores 10 mana. this makes a big difference because obviously that is a lot of mana to get. You want to rotate it until we are at this stage here, because then you can immediately grow up and get the extra maximum mana and a big bump to your stunned after teleport enemies, then head down to actually get the static surge node itself before actually making your way to the extra stun damage and the glyph slot. And in that final glyph slot, you want control so you can really pop with your frozen and stunned as you cycle round teleport, meteor dropping. So, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is how to make Meteor, well, Meteor. And I hope you have enjoyed it, I hope you feel inspired by it, and I hope you have good results if you want to try it. This is by far and away the most success I have had with anything that focuses on fire, and I really don't think that it struggles to compete with either Ice Shards, Ice Spikes, Blizzard, or Arc Lash. I'd say it's about 90 to 95% as strong as those, with very different flavor and higher top-end potential if you get that perfect, vulnerable, healthy crit that just really scratches that itch. For now then, like you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more, consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.